You know him, you love him, you love to hate him. He may or may not make you strangely aroused and uncomfortable. It is the Dragon Prince's most enigmatic character, Aaravos. This Star-Touch elf has confused fans and characters alike since his first appearance. His relationship with Viren is as fascinating as it is toxic. Even though Viren is an abusive father and a constant warmongerer, certainly as opposed to the more kind and restrained Harrow, that doesn't make it a pleasant occasion to see him be taken advantage of like this. Aaravos is able to take advantage of Viren, in large part because he knows Viren better than Viren knows himself. There is a part of Viren that is possessed by self-loathing. He's full of doubt and concern. Try as he might to pretend otherwise, he is not entirely committed to his plans. Part of him constantly questions whether they will actually work. If nothing else, he questions his capacity to complete them. He constantly questions himself. He wonders if he is good enough. Aaravos promises him answers and power, and that is enough for Viren to fall under his spell. Aaravos lurks in the shadows, much like Ozai did in the last famous series that Aaron worked on, Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is not entirely clear what he wants. Obviously, his foremost desire is to free himself from prison, but what about after that? What does he really want? What is his plan going forward? We are inevitably going to get answers to these questions, so it's worthwhile pondering what these answers are going to be. Think about what we currently know about Aaravos. It's not that much. We know he's over 1,000 years old. We know he is arguably the most powerful being in this universe, even more powerful than the Archdragons. We know he despises elves and dragons, even though he himself is an elf. But so much remains unclear. Our only window into Aaravos' past right now is Aaravos himself, and he is not necessarily a reliable narrator. One of the great reveals of the Dragon Prince is that Aaravos is the one narrating to us the introductory monologue at the start of Episode 1. We have been trained by fantasy shows to take introductory monologues at face value, and to not question them. Think about Avatar: The Last Airbender, for example. Katara relays all the information we need to know about this world up front. That doesn't mean she's all-knowing. She's obviously not. She doesn't even know what she herself is capable of, because she is young and unworldly. But we're supposed to think that she is not trying to deceive us. We're supposed to think that she has something resembling a clue pertaining to what the future holds. But Aaravos is not necessarily trustworthy. He has every reason to paint things in a light that favors himself. This destabilizes our understanding of the world. Now, this does not mean that everything he says in the introductory monologue is incorrect. A lot of it is correct. But going back to it, knowing it's by Aaravos, raises a lot of questions. So just who is this androgynous elf? What exactly does he want? Why was he imprisoned in the first place? What are his motives? That is what we are here to explore. Now, before we get too deep into this, I'd like to clarify that I am almost completely sure Aaravos is going to make it out of his prison. Just from a dramatic standpoint, it would be almost obscenely disappointing to set up a juicy scenario like this ancient evil being wants to manipulate a human in order to free himself from prison, and then keep him in the prison. Considering the 3-act structure of the show, with the first 3 seasons taking up the first act, I would expect Aaravos to break out of his prison in the next couple seasons, in seasons 4 or 5. This would put his escape in the second act, the Dark Act. After that, he will become much more of a physical presence in the show. and we will get to learn more about him. I hope the answers we receive are as interesting as the mystique the show has crafted around him. This is one way the show could improve upon Avatar: The Last Airbender. For 2 whole seasons, that show created this mystique around Ozai, going so far as to keep his face shrouded in darkness. Then we actually get to see what he looks like in Season 3, and, well, he's not that impressive. He is a manipulative jerk who's going insane and who wants to take over the world. Now, from Zuko's perspective, he is a fear-evoking villain. He is the embodiment of everything Zuko must overcome. It is not a coincidence that we do not see Ozai's face until Zuko finally starts to see his father for who he really is, and understand just how hollow his father's promise of honor really is. But once we are separated from Zuko's subjectivity, Ozai becomes substantially less interesting. The more the show reveals about him, the less we feel like we know him. He becomes more blandly standard and bluntly archetypical. The Dragon Prince would be well to not follow that path, as it characterizes Aaravos. Of course, the show could just opt to not reveal his secrets and leave him as enigmatic as he currently is, but I do not think it is going to take that route. I doubt many fans would find that satisfying. If you introduce a character with a whole lot of mysteries about them, and then you don't actually answer these mysteries, a lot of fans are going to be enraged. So again, we must ask ourselves, what does Aaravos want exactly? What if he is not a pure black and white villain? What if he is more morally ambiguous? Now, that shouldn't mean that he shouldn't be a villain, or that Callum, Rayla, and Ezrin shouldn't need to defeat him. Indeed, considering all the terrible things he has done, not having a story where they defeat him could not reasonably be considered triumphant. However, what if he, despite all the horrible things he has done, has a point? A real point that influences the minds and hearts of our protagonists. Now, while I am always ready and willing to recommend moral ambiguity, and I do think that they are going to go this route, it is significantly more difficult to introduce that moral ambiguity when your villain is not this typical well-intentioned bad guy, but rather this enigmatic, cosmic creature. We don't quite know who Aaravos is. Right now, he's this inscrutable eldritch terror, even as he's also recognizably vain and petty in a very human way. He is somewhere between Lucifer and Cthulhu. It is hard to make a character like that palatable except in an, ooh, he's interesting and I want to know more about him kind of way. It is entirely possible that he could be exactly as evil as everyone, with the exception of Viren, thinks he is. Maybe he wants to make a world where he is the only magical creature, so he can reign as the supreme emperor of the planet. Maybe he wants to kill all dragons, because when dragons are gone, his power will be unmatched. Maybe he wants to destroy all elemental sources of magic, so that the only way to use magic will be to use dark magic. Maybe he's secretly Callum's father, as I've seen more than one person suggest, and he wants to escape his prison just so he can reconnect with his son. Maybe he hated everyone making fun of his insect familiar, so he wants to turn everyone into insects, then stomp on them for revenge. Based on what we know about Aaravos, most of these hypotheses are plausible, at least until you start to think about them. But it would be much more interesting if Aaravos was more than just your cookie-cutter antagonist once you cut through all the layers of intrigue and mystery. I want to see various members of Team Callum, as I'm going to call them from this point onward, be swayed by his ideas. Villains are not nearly as interesting without their relationship to the hero. Would Scar be half the villain he is if he wasn't Simba's uncle? Would Darth Vader be half the villain he is if he was not Luke Skywalker's father? No, of course not. But by relationships, I don't just mean familial relationships. There are a lot of things that can constitute relationships. I don't necessarily want Aaravos to be revealed to be Callum's father or anything wacky like that, but I do want to see him try to tempt Callum. Why Callum? Well, number one, he is the main protagonist of this series, and number two, of the main trio, he is the most vulnerable to being tempted. Aaravos and Rayla would likely despise each other as soon as they met, and I highly doubt Ezrin would be tempted by Aaravos' offers. The kid has a very pure heart. This is a kid whose main problem with his father, the wise but over-idealistic King Harrow, is that his father was not idealistic enough. I doubt Aaravos is going to try to tempt him because there would be no real tension. But for Callum, there's a chance. It would have to be properly built up to, but it is not impossible. Callum has always been defined by his insecurities and by the people he has lost. He has lost his mother and his stepfather, and as far as we know, he never knew his biological father. What if Aaravos, using his immense power, offers to bring Harrow and Sarai back from the dead? Does Aaravos have this power? Well, we don't know, but it would make the stakes absolutely thrilling. Imagine how difficult it would be for Callum to reject that offer. He would have to turn down the chance to see the two people he cares about the most. Now, this does not mean Aaravos' goals don't matter. Rather, they matter a lot. If Aaravos wants to, say, destroy the world, then nothing he could offer Callum would make Callum consider joining him. But if Aaravos' goal is reasonable, at least in theory, say he wants to bring about a world without magic, where humans and elves are finally equal, but in order to do that, he would have to kill all the dragons, then Callum would be a lot more troubled by Aaravos' offer. Ezrin, who is a loyal friend of dragons and a surrogate parent to Ozymandias, would be insulted by this offer, as would Rayla, considering how close elves are to dragons. But if Aaravos offers to bring Callum's mother and stepfather back from the dead, if Callum helps Aaravos achieve this goal, Callum would at least consider it. Eventually, he would say no, of course, but if he genuinely considers this offer, that would make his overcoming it much more of a profound and affecting character moment. Do I believe Aaravos wants to bring about the end of magic? I don't know, but considering how much he despises dragons and other elves, it does not seem entirely unlikely. Given the limited information we have at this juncture, I believe the scenario I proposed is reasonably likely and dramatically effective. After all, I want to be able to sympathize with Aaravos even as I denounce his behavior. His plan should be something that makes a warped kind of sense if you put yourself in his mindset. And it should be something that involves him wanting to destroy elves or dragons, considering how integral his hatred of elves and dragons has been to his character thus far. It would be difficult for Aaravos to be as fascinating of a final villain as he is right now as this mysterious looming threat, but if they make him more than just a standard doom and gloom baddie, then making him fascinating will be far from impossible. So thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more analyses like this. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. It is a brilliant show. It just keeps revealing more nuances and intricacies as it goes along. I really cannot wait for Season 4, and I hope you can't wait too. Tune in soon for the next analysis on this channel. It'll be coming soon-ish. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.